The Pope passed away. He was, as popes go, in my view, a pretty decent pope, about the best you can hope for. The Pope is the most influential religious official in the world. He, as far as I know, is the only one who has the cloak of speaking infallibly in certain contexts. He is the head of the Catholic Church, which has 1.4 million members.
No, 1.4 billion
members across the world. He was also the first Latin American pope, moving away from typically picking Europeans. And this really foreshadows in many ways the future of the Catholic Church, which lies in areas like Africa, Asia, and Latin America. He was very good on the environment. He, reflected the teachings of Jesus when it came to caring for the poor and the sojourner and telling the truth and being wary of greed and wealth. And in that sense did reflect the teachings of his church. And, that was pretty good. Obviously, he still is stuck in the hidebound, unacceptable idea that only men run the church and women do the scut work. He came right out and said, women are really good at doing administrative tasks. So, and he didn't go as far as many of us might have liked towards embracing the LGBTQ plus community as part of the communion of Catholics, and was not as good maybe as he could have been on the sexual abuses within the church. But overall, I was impressed with Pope Francis, and it in some ways admired his presidency, his papacy, although in some ways I was also critical. But I think we can all, those of us who have humanitarian values, can mourn the passing at age 88 of Pope Francis. And of course, they are now going to move in secret conclave of the cardinals to elect a new pope. And it'll be interesting to see whether they revert back to picking a European and whether they pick someone on the more progressive side of the church like Pope Francis, or revert to picking a staunch traditionalist and conservative. This is an extremely important secret election that the cardinals are now undertaking.
Have you seen the movie Conclave?
I've been wanting to see that for months.
Right.
You saw it.
I saw it.
Was it good?
I thought it was excellent, but up until the ending, I didn't like the ending.
So don't tell me the ending.
Oh, I was going to tell you the ending right now.
Oh, no.
You think I just spoil it for everybody watching? I think especially now, after the Pope's death, I think it's definitely worth the watch.
Yeah, I think this is a very good time.
And I don't know, maybe you'll like the ending. I don't know.
Maybe. And, the way they signal it is there's black smoke if there's no Pope yet, and white smoke if there is a Pope. So we're waiting to see when the white smoke will issue and who will be the next, certainly if not the most important religious leader in the world. I would say the Pope is certainly one of the most critical religious leaders in the world. I also need to mention how the Pope stood up to J.D. Vance, who quoted this antediluvian medieval doctrine that, the value of lives diminishes the farther away you get from the homeland. Pope Francis, quite legitimately rebuked him for that. Lives are valuable equally. Human souls are valued equally, no matter where they may reside.
What would it take to persuade right-wing evangelicals, at least some of them, to abandon Trump? Is there a secondary key that could trigger one of these shifts in the voting blocks?
Read my book, Conservative at the Core. I have a whole chapter on that.
Wow.
In which I believe I've demonstrate with lots of evidence that, in fact, the MAGA movement, and you've heard this before from me, has not faithfully represented the teachings of Jesus, but has distorted the teaching, has minimized what the overwhelming thrust of the teachings of Jesus is all about, which is being wary of greed and wealth, caring for the sojourner and the poor, being truthful to one another. This is the great thrust of his teachings, totally ignored by conservative, politically motivated evangelical Christians who focus on things that are either not even a part of Jesus' teaching, like abortion or, dealing with non-heterosexual peoples. And the more that can be pointed out, the better the chances are of making some dent in what is still overwhelmingly evangelical Christian support for MAGA.
The Pope lived much closer to Jesus' teaching than any MAGA or right-wing conservative movement in the United States, that's for sure.
That is for sure. And there are evangelical Christians, who draw very different teachings. There's a movement in America, one of the most significant reform movements, called the social gospel. It was very active in the late 19th and early 20th century. And the social gospel taught us, it was evangelical Protestants who believe that the teachings of Jesus teaches us that we have to make society better. Do things like make sure we have safe food and drugs, clean up the slums, close down the sweatshops, exercise some control over the very rich and their corporations. A whole different set of teachings than you hear from right-wing evangelicals.